Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're all well. I'm back at home doing my session today, and apologies for anyone who tried to join last week or earlier in the week. I've had a bit of a crazy week. I had the dreaded COVID positive and actually was a little ill with it for a few days, but today has been the first time I put a bit of makeup on, especially for you guys. And I'm actually really grateful to be able to bring you this blanket. I've done a little bit of crocheting in the last few days, but not half as much as I'd kind of hoped or planned, because I've been pretty good for nothing. So hopefully today will go well and I'm back to normal. So we're making a multi-stitch blanket. So this is my huge blanket here, which was last year's project. And since then, I've taught loads of people here in the studio and on Zoom, actually, how to make it. And it's just a really good, fun, easy project. It uses up loads of your kind of scraps that you might have at home. Let me just turn this phone down a second. Sorry, I've got another phone on the go. I'll just turn it down. Sorry, I can kind of hear an echo of my voice. It's a really good use of scraps, and you can kind of go as wild or as simple as you want. And maybe afterwards I'll send a couple of pictures in the chat, actually, because some friends who've done it have done just a solid one colour, just gone for the idea of the texture for the different stitches, and other people have done like a totally different colour every line, and both look beautiful. Some people have gone super organised and done like 3 colours, repeat. Other people have gone like 8 and gone totally random. Like, there is no rules, which is why it's quite a nice project to have on the go, having the corner on the sofa, and whenever you feel the urge to do a couple of lines, you can just pick it up for half an hour and put it back again. It's also got the benefit of it's not too difficult to finish off, so it's not like it kind of has the look of a granny square kind of blanket, but without that kind of having to put 100 granny squares together at the end as well. And then the thing I have managed to finish in the last couple of days is a multi-stitch cushion. So that was super quick and easy. So I'll explain a little bit more about that either today or in the future weeks. So let's get started. And just a heads up that this is suitable for people who are beginners to crochet. Lots of the people who've joined me doing it have only ever made a couple of things, and then they jump into this. It's a really good way to build up confidence in those stitches that you do. So yeah, let us know if you're joining, and let us know if you're planning to have a go at making one, whether you're going to make a blanket, a cushion. And the next thing I hope to do with the skill is make a twiddle muff as well for people with dementia. So hopefully over the next 3 or 4 weeks I'll have finished that as well, so I can tell you a little bit more about how I did that. Hi Rosemary, good to see you. Hi Jean as well. Oh great. Great. And Jean crochet as well, which would be fab to know that she can get cracking today. And that is totally the way I'd like you to do this. I'm going to switch in a second. Victoria's here helping me out, and we've had a bit of a disaster with technology, but I believe my hands will pop up and show you what I'm about to do. And I'm just going to kind of crochet a little, and I'm going to talk a little bit about things. Otherwise I could literally sit there and talk forever, so I'm sure you don't want that. So the size, so what I would suggest you do is you make a little sample. Now, I don't have everything at home, but what we do in the studio is we make little stitch samplers, like little mini versions. So we have a little go at making 12 stitches, and then we jump back into our blanket. So all we do is we have a bunch of small balls of wool that we use to create this. And then that's really useful for being able to just get warmed up before you get into it. And I'm sure you've got some yarn around like this. Now, the blanket that I made is a chunky yarn blanket, because if you've attended any of my crochet sessions, you'll know that I'm addicted to chunky yarn. I just love how fast it builds up. But as I talk, I'll explain a little bit more about all the other yarns that you can use and the differences that your process will have. But I'm like I said, I'd be keen to also crochet a little. So if you're joining me, if you want to do a slip knot, lots of people do them in different ways. So do them the way that you like to do them. I just make a little fish, I pop the loop through the fish, and then I pull the 2 straight ends together. But hopefully lots of you can crochet a little bit already. That's all we need, is just to be able to do a chain and a stitch, and you can jump into this project. Okay, excuse this green finger of all the fingers, but I dyed something last night and it got on that finger, and that's the one you're going to be looking at all day, so apologies for that. So here we go. So we're going to do 12 chains, and this is just for our little sample one. So that's just yarn over, always over the back of the crochet hook, and then pulling it through, and that's one. Now, lots of people struggle with making their chains way too tight, and then they end up with a blanket that has a kind of like, tails off at the end. It gets too narrow because the chain is too tight and the stitches are bigger. I would suggest that you use, and I'd almost always do this, a bigger crochet hook to do your chain. So if you're using a chunky yarn, which is normally a size 6 hook, you would upgrade to a size 8 hook just for the line of the chain. Okay, so if you were doing a double knit, which is normally a size 4 crochet hook, you would upgrade to maybe a 5 or a 6 just for the chain. It will cause you no drama if it's too big. It will cause you drama if it's too small. So that would be my top tip. And then I didn't actually count those chains because I was busy chatting away. If you don't know how to count your chains, you can just literally afterwards, I just count the little dips here or the little rainbows on the top. I'm looking for the surfaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I've just got 2 more to go to get to the 12. 1, 2. Okay, so a little chain of 12s in my chunky yarn. And again, I'm going to get started on the first stitch, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how you're going to size and count your chains, because otherwise, like I said, I'd end up talking for ages, and I'd rather you were crocheting a little while she watched. So hopefully you all know that whenever you do stitches, there's always an add-on. There's some sort of chain that you need to add on, which will mean that you're making up for the height. We're going to start with the smallest of all the stitches, and that's a double crochet. So that just requires 1 extra chain. Okay, so we've currently done 12 plus 1. That would be what this pattern would say. We're then going to ignore that chain. Some of you might know this stitch as single crochet. That's the American name for it. And it's probably the easiest of the crochet stitches. All you do is you go, so you're going to ignore the first loop that you made. You never count the one that's on your crochet hook either. And you're going into the second chain along. So ignore the first, go into the second, go into that rainbow at the top, yarn over at the back there and pull that yarn through like so, yarn over and pull through the 2 hoops. That's the end of the stitch. That's the stitch there. So let's do it again. Straight into the next one. So don't worry about missing anything out this time. It's only at the beginning you do that. And then you're just going to go all the way along. And in theory, if you've done it, counted them correctly, you should have 12 by the end. So just going through the process one more time. In to the next chain, yarn over. You'll notice I just kind of leave my yarn there ready to go. Pull that through, yarn over, pull through. Straight in to the next chain, pick up the yarn, yarn over, pull through 2. Fab. So I've got a few people saying thanks for the top tip. And then Gina said about the twiddle muffs as well. Yeah, I definitely think that you guys are the right crowd to help me kind of learn how to make those. And wouldn't it be great as if we could have some sort of like national kind of collection of them, if I could kind of come up with a video. And then, I really think that this project lends itself beautifully. So it could actually end up being your project piece that you make. So you have a little one on the go that you then at the end assemble into a twiddle muff, and then a bigger one on the go, which is your blanket. But I warn you now, this blanket is very addictive, and lots of the people who've made them with me have ended up making many. And we're actually going to change colour on the last stitch. I'm going to leave that as it is for now, and I'm going to give you a second to catch up as well. And if you do, Victoria, if you're still listening, feel free to put my face on big for a minute. I'm going to talk for a second. Thank you very much. About counting your chains. Okay. So the great thing about this project is that you kind of just make a chain. and then you just keep going, and then you think, right, that fits my bed or my sofa or my body or whatever it is that you want to make the blanket for. Okay, I'm not going to sit here and say you have to make 124 chains or whatever. I want you all to choose yarn that you have at home, or go out to go shopping and buy some new yarn, and I want you to make a blanket that suits you. The videos that I'm going to do will all be describing 12 stitches. So that's the only thing that might be useful, is that if you make a number, let's say it is 100, and I can't do maths off the top of my head, 100 and something, is that the number is divisible by 12, 120, I know that, 240. So you know then, for the video, that what that we describe here is that you start exactly the same way as I start, and you finish exactly the same way as I start, because your number will divide into that. The other thing is that it's really useful when you're making a long chain, is that if you maybe have some stitch markers, which are those little plastic pins, or like just some hair grips or anything really that you can just pop on there, is to mark off maybe every 12, maybe every 24 stitches, something that will be really easy for you to be able to count. So when you're doing your variety of stitches, some of them are super easy to count. Some of them come in little bundles of 4, some of them come in little bundles of 5. And then you can really quickly, when you want to check if you're making sure that your blanket's still going, you know, has the same amount of stitches, you can go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and you can line that up with those markers below, and you can kind of think, oh, right, that must have lost a stitch by there because there's not 12 in that section. All right, so just make a super long chain as long as you like, then count it, or count it as you go with the little stitch markers, and then just try and make sure that the total number is divisible by 12. And then basically you're going to be starting with some very simple stitches, which I'm going to show you today. I'm going to show you one decorative today, and then each week I'm going to show you more and more decorative, more and more difficult stitches, and you then place them on your blanket in any which way that you like. Some people go, just like I said, super organized and have exactly the same thing time after time. Some people go totally random, and they just kind of throw in whatever stitch they feel like doing. If they're watching some trash on telly, they do a super difficult stitch so they don't have to watch it. And if they're watching something with subtitles, they add some easy stitch so they can concentrate. Those are my top 2 tips there. All right, so yes, we'll just carry on with another stitch, if Victoria wouldn't mind popping. Thank you very much. And we're going to change the colour at the end of the yarn. I still can't believe I used that dye yesterday. Sorry about that. And we're going to try a half treble crochet, which is slightly bigger than this stitch. And if anyone joined me for beginners, they would have learned that stitch. It's named here in Cardiff as Gemma's favourite stitch. So I'm just going to quickly undo that last stitch, because we want to change the colour on the last stitch of your row. The way that we're going to do that is you're going to go in to the hole as normal, you're going to yarn over at the back as normal, and then on the last pull through, so for this stitch that happens to be now, that's the last chance I get to do a yarn over, instead of using my original green, I'm using my new green. These are the colours out of the way, and then that's the one that gets pulled through. Super simple. Just be careful, obviously, because at the moment it's loose, but as soon as you start working on it, it'll all be secured. So then you're going to flip your work like a book, and then you're going to add the starting chains for this stitch. So we're going to do a slightly taller stitch. So I'd like you to do 2 chains, 1 and 2. Okay, so just be careful with them and just give maybe the tails one last pull before you move on. That's the last chance you've got to make that nice and neat. Okay, so the half treble crochet, like I said, is a little bit bigger. I'm trying to remember what it's called in America, like a half double crochet, I believe, something bigger, half double maybe. It's kind of in between a UK double and a treble, hence the name. Okay, so a half treble we're about to do. So how you do this is you do a yarn over first. Okay, so back of crochet hook to front of crochet hook. Make sure that is kept behind your work. Okay, and then you're going actually into the first hole. So you're missing the first 2 chains, which are the the dark green ones you just made, or whatever colour you used, going into the hole below, yarn over, like I said, mine's kind of there anyway, pull that through, and then yarn over. And then this is where it's quite hard because you're pulling through 3 at once. You'll notice I rotate my crochet hook so it's facing down towards the work, and then I pull it through all 3. Okay, so let's do that again. Ooh, looks like I've frozen. Hopefully, did I freeze everywhere? I'll do it again slowly because I noticed that I just froze on my TV. Yarn over into the next hole. All right, with this, make sure you're always, from this row onwards, we're going into stitches. So on top of our crochet hook, we must have this little shape of a V, okay? We must go through to both sides of it. You must make sure, if you go through just one side, that's how you're gonna have big ugly holes in your work because you're gonna stretch it. So you must go in underneath both of those, both sides of the stitch of the V. Pick up the thread from behind, and then yarn over, rotate your crochet hook down, and then drag that through all 3. If this is new to you, this stitch, this will take a little bit of practice. You just need a bit of confidence in your crochet hook, and before long it'll come quite easy. The reason I like this stitch, I find that it's quite quick to grow. It also looks quite nice, but also it was just the first stitch I ever learned randomly, and therefore I've been I thought it was the only one that existed for about the first 6 months. So I struggle to do any others. I get very addicted to doing this one for everything. Yarn over, in, so underneath the V, pick up the thread from behind, yarn over, pull through 3. I'm trying to think what else I've got to say. So I haven't said much about different yarns. So the majority of people that I've taught this to have chosen chunky. Just through my influence, I would have thought. I have seen some lovely Aran blankets. They look really nice. That's generally like a size 5 hook. And that's quite a good medium size because a double knit looks amazing. The detail of the stitches is beautiful. But for the sort of size blanket that I made here, you're looking at over 300 stitches for the base row. Mine was only 150. And therefore you've got basically double the amount of work. But again, after this I'll post some pictures and you'll see the difference is amazing. They do look beautiful, but everything takes more than twice as long to make a double knit blanket. But like I said, it's totally up to you. I know some people feel more comfortable with certain yarns, and that's the beauty of this project. Choose whatever you have at home, choose whatever you fancy the colour of. You know how much time you've got, so you choose a project that suits you. There we go. You'll notice I'm not cutting the ends off the balls, and the reason being is once I've practiced all these stitches, I will just unravel it and then I'll be able to use them again, and you can do the same. It's just kind of practice for now. The final stitch of a row should always be in the kind of the chain space from the row below. It's quite hard to find on a double a row of double stitches, but it's this little thing here, so just make sure it is the same. It's just a little bit lower generally. That was number 11 there, and number 12 is a little bit lower. The other thing is I'm going to change colour on this row, so I'm going to go yarn over just a little bit lower, that hole is. I'm going to pick up that yarn, and then I'm going to find a new colour. I'm going to go red this time, and then on my last yarn over, which for me now is this one, before I pull through the 3, I'm going to introduce my new colour, and that's the colour that's going to go through. Have I seen any more comments? No? Well, hopefully you're all busy crocheting away and you have like a mini sample, 12 double crochet and 12 half treble crochet. So this is just a good way to start the blanket, a nice square edge. And then, like I said, next week we can get a bit creative on our stitches. But the other good thing is it's quite important that we're all talking the same language as far as the stitches, because future stitches I'm going to say things like, now you do 2 doubles and 1 treble or something like that. So at least then, if you remember the names of all these stitches, that'll be much easier for you. So if you can feel free to scribble some notes so that you know which one I'm talking about when I say things like that. I'll obviously be demonstrating, but it makes it much easier if you can remember the names of them. All right, the next one is a little bit taller, so we're going to do 3 chains. You'll notice sometimes I do my chains at the beginning of the row, sometimes I do my chains at the end of the row. Just depends how I feel. Either way, it always ends up that it starts on the right hand side. Apologies to those who are left-handed. I can teach in left-handed, but obviously it's a little bit difficult online to do both. So hopefully you can find a way to flip it and figure it out. Okay, so we've got our 3 chains and we're about to start a taller stitch again. So this is the UK treble crochet we're about to do. There's quite a lot of chat online about whether you should start here or here. The reason being is they say that this acts as a stitch because it is quite chunky. I just personally, I find that if I use that as a stitch, then because I'm not very good at counting, the next row I end up losing a stitch. So I don't do that method. I do then have a little lump that sticks out, but I prefer that way because I find it quicker to making sure that I don't, I always forget on the next row to compensate for it. So it's up to you. If you do the method where you go in now by here, then go for it. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, then just feel free to just join me in the way that I do it, which is basically I just go straight in as I would. I skip the 3 chains that I just made. I do a yarn over, and then I go into the first V of the previous colour, the one that's right below there. Okay. So I'm just showing you there. I've got the V, got the yarn over behind, which I'm pulling through. So I've got my 3 on, so exactly the same. Oh, great. Jean says that she's learned by mirror imaging, so that's good that she's figured it out with left-handed. And then we've got a yarn over. Let's get rid of this so it's a bit clearer. And the only difference between this and the previous stitch is what's about to happen now. What happens now is that first time you just pull through 2 only, and then you do a yarn over and you pull through 2 only. Again, you'll notice I'm always kind of pulling those previous stitches down just because they're quite loose at this early stage. But if you keep control of them, they won't move anywhere. So yarn over into the next V, picking up the thread from behind, so you have 3 on, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, and that's the end of the stitch. So you're going to do 12 of those in total, so I need to do 10 more. So I'll do them a little faster and I'll chat a little, but again, I'm checking the questions, so feel free to let me know if there's anything that you think of that I haven't covered. I've been talking quite a lot. It's been quite nice actually, like I said, after being kind of just talking to my dog. And she looks so sad, my dog, because we go out walking so often, and I've got that covered, but she just looks so confused every time someone comes to pick her up to walk, like why I'm not going with her, and I'm desperate to. It's funny actually, it's the one thing that I've thought about actually. I've thought about coffee a fair bit. I've thought about coffee and wanting to walk my dog. That's all I need. Everything else I've got in this house. But yeah, hopefully on Saturday we'll go for a super long walk to make up for the week that I've confused her. I hope you're all keeping well. Right, so through. So basically, I'm going to teach you 2 more stitches today. And then your homework will be to have a little play on your sample. I'll just explain this last stitch in a sec. And maybe go and get hold of any yarn. And then get started. Like I said, just create the chain to the length you want, which is a number that divides by 12. And start doing this exactly. Just do a row double, do a row of half treble, do a row of treble. And then, like I said, in future weeks then we'll get super creative. Yes, Christine's mentioned the granny stitch. I honestly don't. They took me years to learn. It's mad that it's often quite a popular thing for people to learn as a beginner. I still find them really hard to count. I much prefer this type of crochet where it's straight lines. Just remembering those V's on the top, whilst you've got 12 V's, which you can always go and check at the end of each row to make sure you're still it's all still working out for you. And even then, the thing with this blanket, I'll actually in the next row, I'll show you how to add or drop stitches. So I'll include that in the next description. The one thing that people often make mistakes when they're first learning to crochet, which finds something to poke at, is finding this final stitch. So this was stitch number 11 here. And then the 12th one should be a little bit lower and a little bit bigger. It's the chain space from the previous row. Remember I made those like 3 little chains. Was it two little chains in green? That's them there. All right, I'm trying to go into the middle of them. So actually, if you break it down, it's not just the V on the top there, like normal. There's also a third little bit to it as well. And it's just a little bit away from the edge. And if you look at it close up, it's a row of chains. If you get in that hole, then you'll have lovely square edge crochet and you won't lose or add any stitches. So it's that hole there. Like in chunky yarn, you can literally get your finger through it. It's so big. So that would be good practice to try and get into that habit. Yarn over into that big chain space at the end for your final stitch, pulling it through, and then we can still do the same process for changing the colour. So that's yarn over, pull through 2, and then on your final yarn over, this one, that's where you bring in your new colour. So I'm going for a darker blue. Okay, tighten everything up. This one, the next stitch, is going to be the biggest stitch we're going to do in the whole blanket. Some people actually don't like the look of this stitch, but it is quite important to make some of these kind of wave stitches, which is probably one of the most popular stitches that we do in this blanket. These ones here, this is basically just doing the stitches in order of small to large, and the large ones here are the stitch I'm about to teach you. So if you don't like it, feel free not to put it in your final blanket, but do give it a try for at least the 12 stitches, because we're definitely going to be using it to make those a few stitches along the way. So this time I'd like to chain 4. So yarn over, pull through, 2, 3, 4 times. Okay, flip it like a book and we'll have a go at this. Give everything a little tighten, and then we're going to go into this first V of your previous colour. So in a pattern, this would say skip 4, which means skip 1, 2, 3, 4 that you just made. Yarn over, go into the V. Again, be careful that you don't go below the V. There's that temptation on this sort of stitch is to go to this big hole below it. But if you do that, you're going to overlap your stitches and your blanket's not going to grow very quickly at all. So you should be just going underneath that V only. So you've gone in, oh sorry, I've missed a bit, sorry, I'll go start again. Yarn over twice, okay, so quite an unusual process. Yarn over and wrapping it around for a second time. Then go under that V, pick up the yarn from behind, so you have 4 on this time, and then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, you guessed it, pull through 2. So it's a crazy tall stitch. So in the blanket, it can look a bit gappy, but like I said, it'd be great if you could give it a practice because it does have its uses in decorative stitches. So yarn over twice into the next V, picking up the thread from behind, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through, ooh, got skagged it a bit there, but pull through 2. Okay, yarn over twice, into the next hole, picking up the thread, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, so I'll just do those more quietly and quickly. Oh, did I do? I didn't do it twice. I find it quite hard to get to the habit of this one. 1, 2, in. So it'd be great if, like I said, if you can just at least give this a practice. And if you like it, or especially if you're using thinner yarns, you might want to include it in your blanket and your blanket will grow nice and quickly. This one, oh yes, good question. This one is called a double treble. So it's the biggest of all of them. So double treble. So your notes could be something like, I would probably write, I'll show you what I do actually. Oh, excuse, so nice. I write something like this. So this was for my original blanket. I chained 152, and then I had row 1. I wish I'd made these a bit clearer now, but I've got a +1 in very small there. That's my chain number, double crochet, and then I use a teal colour in my big blanket. So for the beginning, I found this really useful to kind of refer to. Now I kind of understand what all the stitches are, but when they were all new to me, it was quite good to getting used to them. Row 2, +2, half treble crochet. Then row 3, did a +3 chain, treble crochet. Row 4, oh, sorry, ignore that. I've realised my blanket is different to this. But you're going to write there +4 and then double treble crochet, which is the stitch that you're currently giving a go, hopefully. 1, 2. And like I said, that reference guide was quite useful, because sometimes I would look at my blanket and think, what stitch do I fancy doing next? And then I'd be able to have a little look at my notes and figure out which one would look nice next. Because obviously some of them are tall, some of them are thin. So depending on what stage of your design you're at. 1, 2, 3. And then, yeah, I think I'll do a granny stripe with you. Don't worry, Christine, not a granny square. The stripe is so much easier and looks lovely as an entire blanket, so it's quite a nice one to learn. It's a real quick one as well, because obviously it's quite gappy. Like I said, then I'll set your homework, which is to have a go. So I'm going to go into the chain space on the final row here, and then I'm just going to go through. And then I think I've got one more colour left. Perfect. And I'm just going to pull that through. Yarn over. Oh no, not yet. I wasn't on the final one. I'm ahead of myself. Yarn over. So it's the last pull through. Yarn over, pull through 2, and then the last yarn over would be now. So that's going to be lilac. Pull through 2. Cool. And then I'm just going to quickly, I've got something open on my computer just to remind me which granny I used. Cool. I use that's the thing with all these stitches, is that they can be, you can use any of these stitches really. It's hard to, maybe we'll go into that next week, maybe a bit too much for today, but I try and keep to the same instructions, otherwise I get confused. But I could easily do a granny stripe. I could do a double crochet one, a half treble one, a treble one, whatever I was feeling really. But I'll show you this one, which is using 3 chains. All right, so when you're happy that you've done that row, you can add your 3 chains in your final colour. It's getting a bit messy now with all these balls attached, but like I said, I'd rather not cut them off, otherwise they'd probably be too short to use again. Okay. So the idea of a granny stripe, let me just show you a couple actually. I use them on my border here. These are granny stripes here. And I use them lower down my blanket here, these rows here. And like I said, so they have got quite big holes in them, but they build up really quickly, and they just kind of look quite effective. And they're nice and easy. So good finisher for today, hopefully. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a yarn over, and I'm going to do one granny in here. I hope this adds up now. I'm kind of regretting that my notes aren't any better, but we'll all learn together. How about that? So I'm going to do half a granny in the first row. So I'm going to do, I did a 3 chain, didn't I? So I need to do a treble crochet. So it's yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, so that's kind of like a little half granny there. Again, that's going to hopefully make more sense in a minute when I carry on and do a full granny. A full granny involves me skipping 2, so not going into the next V, not going into the V after that, going into the 3rd V away. So ignore, and going into this one. But because I'm doing a treble, I need to yarn over first. So yarn over, ignore, going into the 3rd, picking up the yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, so this is the grannies starting to build up here. I then need to put 2 more trebles inside the exact same hole. Okay, so the same hole I just put this treble in, in total, I need to put 3 trebles inside the same hole. So yarn over in the same hole again, picking up the yarn, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then final time, yarn over into the hole, yarn over, pull through 2. Now you may have noticed at the beginning of this I explained that I think this is going to add up. The reason the blanket doesn't 100% add up every time is because we're using such a combination of stitches. So some stitches fit perfectly into a row of something that divides by 4, some 5, some 7. So there's no real hard and fast rules. Basically, you've got to blag it a bit. And I've realised I've said that I'm going to show you how to add or decrease a stitch, and I forgot. So I'll go back and touch on that before we finish up for today. So that's why I need to sometimes kind of blag it, and that's why we'll go along with what I do in the video, and I might even share some extra videos that I've made previously as well, which might be useful for you. So skipping 2 and then going into the 3rd and doing exactly the same again, doing 3 trebles. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2. Sharon's a bit lost. What are you lost on, Sharon? 1, 2, ignoring 2, going into the 3rd, pull through 2, pull through 2, yarn over into the same hole. So rather basically than putting a treble in every single hole, we're putting 3 inside. I'm trying to think how to describe it. 3 inside every, not other one, because there's 2 in between every other 2, I suppose. So if you think about the total of stitches, you've put 3, 1, 2, 3 stitches across 1, 2, 3, 1 that you've used and 2 that you haven't. So that's how it adds up. Oh, no worries. Christine's having some problems with it freezing. But yeah, it'll be available forever, so you can come back and find it another time. All right, so this is a good example. Actually, this has worked out well, luckily. So I can quickly count. Yeah, we're going to do another line in a minute, Sharon, so don't worry too much. So we've got 3, 6, 9, and then we've got 2 here. So that's number 10 and number 11. So I just need 1 more stitch to finish this row, which is perfect because I actually only have 2 stitches to go into. So I'm just going to go into the end and then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So that works out brilliantly. I've ended up with 12 stitches again. 3, 6, 9. I did 2 here and then 1 here. So now I've got 9 stitches to finish. Is that right? I have to count my V's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh no, of course I've gone to my original. I put 2 in the end. Oh dear. 1, 2, 3. I had 1 at the beginning, didn't I? Based on the way that I do it. So there you go. That actually only counts as 1 because I ignore that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 stitches across the row there. This time I'm not going to bother changing colour because I've got so many colours on the go, and you can decide when you change colour or not. So for those who missed this row, if you just want to start on this row, that'll be fine. So 1, 2, 3 chains at the beginning. Flip like a book. All right, I'll talk to the people who are starting on top of a regular line. So if you're up to date, ignore me for a minute. If you're a row behind, then listen now. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in for people who are just starting afresh. You're going to just do 1 treble crochet inside the hole at the bottom of, so you're ignoring your chains that you just built and you're going into that hole there like so. I'm doing 1 treble crochet, so that's a yarn over and then pull through twice. So pull through 2, pull through 2. And then what you would do, Sharon, and anyone else who's stuck there, is then you would skip 2, and then in the next one you would then put 3 treble crochets in that V stitch there. All right, then you'd skip 2, and then you'd put 3 trebles in the next one, skip 2, and then put 3 trebles in the next one. All right, so if you are with me, I'll just take that one back out, because what we're basically going to do is in this row, we're not going to put it in just below the V. We're going to put it a little bit deeper into these holes here, and that makes them look like nice squares. Okay, we can just start with this as this can be the side of our work. We're not going to add anything extra here. We're going to go straight to this big hole here. And we're going to go yarn over all the way down to the big hole. We're going to pick up the yarn from below. We're going to yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So that's our first treble in the big hole. I'm going to do that again in the same hole. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And then finally a third time, yarn over into the big hole, pull through 2, pull through 2. And that gives this effect of the grannies. So like I said, if you change colour, they'd also be different colours. So we'll do it again. We should be able to fit it 3 more times in the row. So we've got yarn over into the big hole, pull it through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Going again, same big hole, do our next treble, and then yarn over into the big hole. Final one, not final one, sorry, there's 2 more to go. Going to the next big hole, doing 3 trebles inside there. 1, 2, 3, and then into the next hole. 1, 2, and 3. I'm just going to see how this works out numbers wise. 1, 2, 3. So there you can see, hopefully, maybe I should have changed colour, be a bit more obvious then, but you can see you've got these little blocks either side then. The only thing, no, actually that ends quite nicely actually. That's the square edge then, and also 3, 6, 9, 12. So we're back at 12 stitches, which is perfect. So if you wanted to, you could have changed colour on the last row. You could then change chain 3, and then you would do that row again. All right, and this time putting your 3 treble crochets in these holes there. So you could do as many rows as this as you fancied all the way along, but the numbers should be the same as that row, and then it will work out evenly over the section. All right, and then the final thing I wanted to show you was just how to increase and decrease stitches. So at the studio, we're not too worried about kind of, you know, making everything perfect and making sure that you, like, you know, like I say, get 12 every time. If you end up a row and you've got 1 too many or 2 less, it's not worth stressing out about. There's little tricks you can do. So what I would suggest is on a kind of a simple row, something like a double crochet or a half treble crochet, one of the first 2 that we learnt. I put in a row of those, and in this row, I'd either drop or add a stitch. So what I would be doing is I would just be going along my row as normal. I'm just doing some doubles. All right, not a worry in the world. And let's say I know that I accidentally have 1, 2, I want to drop a stitch. I want 1 less. So basically I need to create less V's on the top surface, but I don't want to leave any big holes. So what I could do is I could just go in to the stitch, pick up the thread from behind and not finish it off. Then go in, so I've left those 2 hoops on, so I've not done the yarn over and the pull through, so I'm not creating a V. So instead I'm going into the next V, and this is the one that I'll then do the yarn over and pull through. So I've kind of done 4 stitches, but all I've been left with is 3 V's because I didn't complete 1 stitch. So just to do it again, I go in, pick up the yarn, but don't finish that stitch, and then go into the next stitch, pick up the yarn, and that one I finish. And there, you see how it's going in? It's because I've already in this row dropped 2 stitches. I've gone across 6, but I've actually only made 4 stitches. So that's quite a good way of getting your numbers back on track. And if it's in that way, if it's the opposite and you need to add some stitches because you seem to have too few on a row, all I do is just put 2 stitches inside. So let's go double again. So I just put 1 inside here, and that's made a V, and then I just go back into it and make a second one. And then I just carry on as normal. And I know now on the next row, I've got enough V's in the top surface and I'm back on track to completing it. If, let's say, for some reason you had 2 or 3, I would just scatter them out along the row. So further along the row, then I would do that again. I wouldn't do them all at once. I would do 1 there, say 1 there. And can you see already I've got more of these and I'm back on track for the next row, being back to the number that I wanted. All right, whew, I feel tired now. And I know I can't talk for too much longer because they've got, I think maybe there's a yoga session coming soon, so I don't want to interfere with that. And I think I've probably taught you lots. I don't know if you're still there, Vic. If you are, I'll put me on big for just a second and I'll just thank you very much. And yeah, so like I said, that was loads of information. I've thought of a few things as I've talked that I can share in the chat. So I'll sit here for a minute now and post a few things in the comments that might be useful to you. But yeah, so that's, I'd love it if you joined. It'd be lovely to see the progress. It'd be nice to all kind of crochet along together. And then if you were interested in like just having a small project, then this, which like I said, I can talk about a little bit more another time. But for me, as a chunky yarn user, it was 46 stitches that I did. I can't remember where I started though. Here somewhere. Oh, anyway, it basically is like a long, the reason I made it's not as obvious as it should be is I didn't like the way the pattern was falling, so I actually turned the bit over and started working on the upside down. Anyway, ignore that. Basically, it was once like a long kind of table runner piece. It was about 46 centimeters wide and it was about 1 meter long. So what you've just done there, it would be like much wider, the width of a pillow or a cushion, or whatever you have at home. And then I've done 100 kind of centimeters worth, like a scarf, basically, a really wide scarf. So if you fancy doing one of those instead, then maybe next week I could show you how I then turned my big scarf into a cushion. And that was really easy and a really kind of like just a few nights in front of the telly kind of project. No worries, Jean. Yes. So yeah, like I said, sorry about the interruption of it not happening last week, but hopefully now I'm back on track. So the plan is 1:30 next Thursday here. And again, you can catch up with it later. And I plan to do maybe the V shape, maybe the shell, maybe the wave, maybe the waffle. That possibly won't happen, and when I get here I'll teach something else, but it'll be something much more decorative next week. So practice your basic stitches and we'll get you up and running on your beautiful blanket. And do as well post any pictures in the chat of the colors that you choose. It'd be lovely to be involved in the process. Great. Oh, lovely. And then you said Christine says her daughter-in-law needs blankets. Yes, so this is a great one because it's a really good use of yarn. I think that's answered all the questions. Thank you, everyone. It's nice, like I said, to be back and talking to people after a funny week. So I hope it was hopefully quite clear. And suddenly I've lost my words right at the end. All right. Have a good afternoon. Bye.